Thank you, Lily, for inviting me. It's really nice to be here, and I really want to applaud my previous speakers who have spoken so eloquently about the challenges and ideas on improving trust, collaboration, and action, so to say. Um, Very briefly, you see the introduction of me. I wear two hats. I work at an organization called Search for Common Ground and directing our children youth programs, and Search is an international peace building conflict transformation organization. And the other hat is I co-chair the Global Coalition on Youth Peace and Security in partnership with the United Network of Young Peace Builders and UNDPPA and UNFPA together. But I wanted to take a moment to step back from this and share with you the spirit and intent of this conversation and share a story with you. And I share a story of what worked within the spaces of youth and peace and security at large, where intergenerational trust and barriers were overcome in some ways or the other. Back in the day, the problem that we were facing with young people was policymakers were responding to young people based on a policy panic, pinning young people as the troublemakers, the victims, and also that need to be managed and controlled. And what young people around the world and some civil society came together was saying, let's transform this problematic policy narrative to see how we can create a framework that sees young people as partners, especially in high context situations like peace and security. This is where men with guns and men with power really think about marginalized societies in a lot of spaces. So we wanted to actually disrupt this space. And I want to share with you how we went about doing that. And the way we went about it was creating like a global coalition on youth peace and security, bringing a lot of actors together. Right now, we have over 100 organizations from UN agencies to intergovernmental bodies like the African Union, European Union, the Commonwealth, and others, international NGOs, donor organizations, practitioners, scholars, and also young people and youth-led organizations coming together to share a common agenda and a collaborative agenda, which we now call the Youth Peace and Security Agenda. I want to share with you a little bit about the strategy and the purpose of it itself, to how we went about transforming this policy panic concept to policy young people as partners itself. And there were three kind of pillars of our work. And we first wanted to say, learning from the 1325 Women, Peace and Security movement and engaging some of them in what worked and what didn't, what pitfalls they faced. We wanted to take a step back and say, let's create first was a political norm framework and create a set of norms that shift the conversation, connecting from country level work to saying, let's globalize this, and at a global level, create some political norms. Second was take these norms and create institutional commitments and national commitments to act on these norms. We realized institutions can't act if they don't have the political mandate to act. So these norms actually help create those norms, create the mandate to act. What is really now looking at is strengthening the financing of leadership beyond the traditional grants that are broken, that continue to marginalize young people, and trying to push institutions to open up their wallets in a sense and see how we can create new ways to invest in young people also. So this is the beginning of that long journey. But what we have learned is that this process of youth engagement, co-leadership and all that is not a project. This is a long-term effort. And that's one of the key lessons we've learned in that. Creating the global coalition was an exercise of bringing people with institutional power, and here I'm giving a framework to think about this engagement itself. Institutional power, like UN actors with institutional power, to work and collaborate with people with network power, horizontal power. Young people's leadership is horizontal, and they have vast networks that they are connected to and they influence. And we wanted to bridge the institutional power with network power of young people. Because we realize that's one of the ways that we can transform the attitudes and norms that exist in society that create barriers for young people in shaping their work. The other piece around this was around making sure that we are walking the talk. The Global Coalition from the early days itself, we brought in the youth, created a youth co-leadership model itself. The United Network of Young Peace Builders, one of the co-leads of the UNO is actually in the audience. they became a very critical partner in this process itself. They were holding us institutions accountable, and also they were holding their own partners at the field level accountable, and vice versa. So this accountability model came from young people and actually enabled the other institutions to work collaboratively on this. So the whole leadership was at the heart of this model itself. So what has this resulted in? It has resulted in 3 Security Council resolutions. There's lots of information about that itself, but I want to highlight 3 points around this idea of collective level impact it has led to. It's not something that the Security Council, people are saying that, oh, it's a UN did this, or Security Council did this, or Search for Common Ground did this. It's the us doing it. I think that's a big transformative space where people feel collectively responsible and collectively feel like they accomplished something with these resolutions. Second, what it does is actually make young people feel seen, make them feel heard, and their work recognized. And it's actually strengthened their sense of dignity and identity when young people feel excluded from society, when the violence of exclusion is so real for people. It actually made them heard. And one example of this is the Security Council, one of the oldest institutions with the oldest people in the country world speaking at these bodies. What we kind of disrupted it and had young people also testify at Security Council meetings, open and closed, several times. And it now created an example of having young people testify. We kind of normalized that itself. But at the beginning, I remember people were very afraid of having young people testify, for all kinds of reasons that adults have. But now it has become a more normal practice. So it was a risk that we actually created, and created an opportunity for people to see that this is important. The third impact of this work is the clear recognition that young people are a political force for peace. They are political actors, and it's important to recognize the political agency that they have and the peace agency that they have. And that's something that is becoming more and more recognized in this field. And very briefly, I want to share with you a couple of key thoughts to prompt the conversation to follow as well. I think as we look forward, we realize we as institutions have struggled in normal times to actually understand how to think of inclusivity, how to think of going beyond our individual identities and institutional politics to do something better for the world. The COVID pandemic has taught us that we institutionally struggle to do that. In the coming years, and we've seen already, there's multiple shocks young people are going to face, including young people. Often institutions become hardened during shocks. So if we have not doing well during times of calmness, imagine a world when there's multiple shocks. We need to get our act together much faster. This is not a walk in the park exercise. We need to elevate our actions, because nice words, nice reports are not going to cut it for young people or people in society writ large. And the beginning of that is recognizing that we are part of the problem. As institutions like UN agencies, civil society, donors, others, we are part of the problem. We are the gatekeepers of the problem that we need to open up the gates to and say, admit it itself. Second is to understand what whole leadership looks like. I know we have used words like accountability and all that as important pillars of this, but we can't assume that people are going to trust governments or institutions because we have money or we have big names behind it. People ultimately don't care about these things. Like as Hawa said, people care about food on the table, and in the coming years, more and more people are going to experience a food pandemic. So we need to understand these realities and understand how we can take these challenges on. So that requires that we understand each other's grievances and we embrace these new models of trust and friendship, as my other colleague also mentioned. Third, we need to be serious about financing these leadership models. We cannot do traditional grant making and think that it's going to settle the problems to come. We need to get over our fear of distrust to young people and say, because grants, financing is a model of distrust. That's why you create layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy that excludes people itself, primarily young people. So when you think about financing, we need to think about it from a trust-based perspective, not a distrust-based perspective. And this the key question, I think, for us as I reflect on our work, and I talked about the policy panic at the beginning. The world was focused on why are young people joining violent extremist groups? Why are young people joining gangs, cults? Why are young people doing drugs? It was a very negative based thing. Part of the question that we were disrupting was, instead of asking these questions like why are young people joining violent groups, we forced ourselves to ask a new and disruptive question, a simple but complex question. And that question was, why are most young people peaceful? And this question of why are most young people peaceful opened us, liberated us in a way to think about the world differently, and how who people are in this and understand their grievances better. So with that, I just want to ask ourselves to challenge ourselves to like disrupt these questions that we all think that are important, and think about the world to come, and think about the models that we need to really aspire to, not talk about in nice words. And I really look forward to the following conversation in this. Thank you for inviting me to be part of it.